Hey, sorry I'm just getting the video up, but I'm still just getting my voice back, so you'll have to bear with me. Monday, or tomorrow I guess, we're going to start looking at plot. Plot is the chain of events that are linked together to create a story. There are 5 different parts to plot. We've got the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. The exposition is basically the introduction to the story. It includes our basic elements so far. See how we tie that back into our learning targets? But anyway, the exposition includes the setting, characters, and introduction to conflict. Now, setting and character we've covered, so we'll just do a quick review. Setting is the time and place of the story, and characters are the people, animals, or imaginary creatures that take part in the story. The setting and character's behavior directly affects the plot or what happens in the story. Now, conflict we've discussed briefly, but I'd like to go over it a little deeper before we move on. So let's break away. Conflict is a struggle between 2 forces. It's the fuel that keeps the action moving forward. There are 2 different kinds of conflict, external and internal. Now with external conflict, you can have character versus character, which is where our protagonist versus our antagonist. Character versus society, where the protagonist experiences conflict with society as a whole. And character versus nature, where the protagonist versus elements of nature. But with internal conflict, it's always character versus self, where the protagonist has some sort of internal battle. The type of conflict can help us determine who the antagonist of our story is. But anyway, let's get back to plot. So that's the exposition. After that, we have the rising action. These are the events that show how the conflict unfolds or becomes more complicated. The rising action builds suspense, which is a feeling of growing tension and excitement. Then we get to the climax, which is the most exciting moment and the turning point. This often results in a change for our protagonist. After the climax, there's, you guessed it, falling action. These events reveal how the protagonist begins to resolve the conflict. It begins to ease the suspense. And finally, there's the resolution, which ties up the loose ends. Sometimes there's an unexpected twist before the story ends. So that's pretty much plot. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. For our class, we'll be putting these elements on a plot diagram to help us keep track. Let's practice plotting a story we all know, Little Red Riding Hood. Exposition. Our setting is once upon a time. The characters are Little Red, mother, and grandmother. And the introduction to conflict is Red's taking goodies to her sick grandmother and asks not to stop on the way. The rising action. The wolf sees Red. He asks her where she's going. Then he suggests she stops and picks some flowers. The wolf gets to grandmother's house first and eats up Granny. Climax. Red gets to the house and finds her grandmother, who is really the wolf, in bed and comments on how different she looks. The wolf leaps out of bed and eats Red. Falling action. A lumberjack hears screaming coming from the house. He rushes in with his axe, and he kills the wolf. And the resolution. Granny and Red are saved and reunited thanks to the lumberjack. So, before class tomorrow, go ahead and write down some ideas for the exposition of the giver, our setting, characters, and introduction to conflict. We'll use this for our opening activity, so make sure you have it. I'll see you then.